To order. Sergeant Arms will please secure the chamber doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President.
All right, Senators, this morning we are very pleased to have the Reverend Dr. C.H. Johnson of Christ Missionary Baptist Church in Fort Washington, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from the 26th District. Please rise for the invocation.
With all heads and hearts bowed before the hand of Almighty God, let us pray. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Eternal and all-wise God, our heavenly Father, the supreme maker and ruler of heaven and earth and all mankind, we lift up unto you these your servants, those in whom you have ordained to serve your people here in the free state of Maryland, conducting the business as legislators. We pray that you will give them both compassion as well as courage to make the decisions through your divine wisdom. O God, we pray that you will direct their hearts and minds as they shall always remember the words of God when the question of humanity seeks an answer of righteousness and justice. The Lord has told you what is good, and this is what he requires of you: to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. This is our prayer in the awesome, marvelous, majestic, and mighty name of God himself. Amen.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 26th District.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and colleagues. I really want to thank you, Dr. Johnson, for coming down. He is a pillar in the 26th Legislative District. He's not just a preacher who preaches in the pulpit, but he is one who is out in the community. I've been pleased to be his colleague and friend for over 30 years, and we've worked together on a number of issues affecting Fort Washington and indeed Prince George's County. I want to thank you for coming, and Mr. President, if we can journalize his prayer. Thank you again to my good friend.
Without objection, Senator, absolutely, we will journalize the Reverend's invocation this morning. Thank him for his service and for being with us this morning to start us off the right way. All right, has everyone recorded their presence in the chamber? Almost. Clerk will take the call. With 46 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Thank you to the protocol chairs and co-chair for the wonderful gifts this morning, and hope everyone has a beautiful and wonderful Valentine's Day planned. I know JPR has 100 witnesses, so the only place you'd like to be is Valentine's Day is 100 witnesses hearings. All right, introductions. Actually, do we have our special guest today? Are we ready? Okay. Let's go ahead and hear from the Senate President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is a very special day. Obviously, it's Valentine's Day, so I think that, it's unfortunate my wife is out of town. She's traveling, and she would have been really honored to be here as a lover of musicals and all things Broadway. She would have just been really, really excited to meet this young man, Miles Frost, who is a Maryland native, American actor, dancer, and singer. I heard a little whoop. We can give an applause for that. Now, Miles, while attending Bowie State University as an audio engineering major, he had a YouTube video performing the song Billie Jean from a high school talent show, which drew the attention of the producers, and he was invited to audition, ultimately winning the part. Earning positive critical attention, Miles won the 2022 Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical for his portrayal of Michael Jackson. Yes. And Miles also received, as in addition to that Tony, which is just amazing, for his portrayal of Michael Jackson in the production of MJ the Musical, he also received a Grammy Award nomination for the cast recording. Congratulations. Well, I believe we have a resolution that we should have read in honor of Miles.
The clerk will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to Miles Frost in recognition of winning the 2022 Tony Award for Best Actor for his portrayal of Michael Jackson in the Broadway theater production of MJ the Musical, and a Grammy Award nomination for the cast recording. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution to be presented on this 14th day of February 2023.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. The Senate of Maryland, Mr. Frost, unanimously celebrates your 2022 Tony Award and for just being a remarkable creative genius here representing the state of Maryland on the national stage. Congratulations. I believe Miles is also joined by some family members here today. We have Charmaine Strayhorn, Hattie Strayhorn. We have Morgan Peel, Maggie Francois, Tyla Sawyer, Jim Cole, Jean Barnes, and Ivan Barnes. And then, of course, we are joined by the wonderful Dr. Bro, who is the incredible president of our Bowie State University. So doing Bowie State proud, the past, present, future. It's fantastic. So congratulations. Wonderful. Congratulations. Thank you all so much. A special shout out to Robin Armstrong from my office, who when saw the award said, "Oh, he's a Bowie State guy. We got to get him to the Senate floor." So we're so glad that we could have you here today. Thank you so much. Keep up the great work. Truly. Excellent. Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd District.
Mr. President, would it be appropriate for the actor to give us a little performance?
You may have to. I think he's got an agent for that. You know, we don't want to break any of the guild rules. Yeah. So, yes. Any other further introductions? Yes. Chair recognizes the senator from Arundel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to welcome and recognize our guest today from the Maryland chapter of the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors here for their legislative day in Annapolis, and they're in the gallery above you, Mr. President. NAFA members are the closest to the consumer and provide products, services, and guidance that increase financial literacy in our society and create financial security and prosperity so their clients can leave a legacy for future generations. Thank you all for joining us today.
Welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Additional introductions? Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from Frederick County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Friends, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome two wonderful citizens of Frederick County and what they do for our children in our county. As a youth football coach and basketball coach for a number of years, it's always a pleasure of mine to be able to introduce people that are in this and come down and do the great things in our communities for the children. So today we have Miss Tamika Thrasher from the Boys and Girls Club. She's the director of the Boys and Girls Club from Frederick County, and Dean Rose, who is on the Frederick County School Board. Thank them and welcome.
Thank you all for being here. Boys and Girls Clubs are doing remarkable work. Yes, Chair recognizes the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. Permission to use another senator's name.
Senator may proceed.
On behalf of Senator West and myself, I wanted to introduce the 2023 class of Carroll County. Are here, and they're in some members of the class are in the gallery, I think, behind me, if they could stand, and just welcome them down.
Welcome, Carroll County Lead.
They're having an event later today for our Carroll County delegation, so Senator West and I will beat it over to the Calvert House for lunch.
Wonderful.
So, all right.
Excellent. That was, I got it. It took me a second. I got it. Well played. Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to introduce my intern, Anise Diebold. Now, she tried to get me to do this, so I will do it. Terp's in the house. She's a senior at University of Maryland, College Park.
Welcome. Wonderful. Appreciate our Terps. Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from Howard and Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask the body to give a warm welcome to, we have two medical students from University of Maryland, Kimia Abdahi and Shrikar Adabhapla, as well as two resident physicians from Johns Hopkins, Stephen Kane and Brian Chen in the forward gallery.
Wonderful. Welcome. Enjoy your visit to Annapolis. Any further introductions? Anything else before we jump in? If not, so be considered the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. We still have some bond initiatives coming in. This is number 22. Clerk will read the bond initiatives.
Number 1, Senator McKay, Hancock Downtown Beautification, Budget and Taxation.
Majority Leader
Number
moves
2.
so be considered the reading of the bond initiatives. We will refer them to the Capital Subcommittee. We've got a report from the Committee on Finance. This is report number 2. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 52, Senator Elfred, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Programs Waiver, Diapers and Menstrual Hygiene Products, favorable with 2 amendments.
Senate Bill 52. Floor Leader, Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore City.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 52 requires that the Department of Human Services, if is the key word, if the U.S. Department of Agriculture based a state submitted a waiver allows recipients of SNAP benefits and recipients in women, infants, and children, better known as the WIC program, to use these program benefits to purchase diapers and menstrual hygiene products. There is a technical amendment that adds sponsors. Amendment number 2, because the WIC program is administered by the Maryland Department of Health as opposed to the Department of Human Services, it assigns the appropriate agency. There is no fiscal impact. Both program benefits consist of federal funds. There was no opposition. I move the amendments and the adoption of a favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections to the amendments? Without objection, the 2 amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is amended, is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 52 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 168, Senator GUZZONE, Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council Establishment, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Anne Arundel as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 168 codifies the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council as an independent unit of state government. Currently, the council operates under the Maryland Department of Disabilities, and it was established by executive order rather than by statute. The council operates and receives funding in accordance with the Federal Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act of 2000. The bill establishes the council's duties, membership, and staff, and requires the council to adopt bylaws, policies, and procedures that comply with state law and the federal act. There are no amendments, there is no fiscal impact, there was no opposition at the committee hearing, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 168 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 200, Senator Lamb, Health Occupation State Board of Chiropractic Examiners, Disciplinary Actions and Procedures, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 200 authorizes the State Board of Chiropractic Examiners to deny a license to an applicant or take a specified action against a licensee, including suspension or revocation of a license if the applicant or licensee fails to comply with any board order. It also specifies that the order of the board may not be stayed pending a judicial review, and authorizes the board to appeal any decision that reverses or modifies its orders. If a license is suspended or revoked, the board is authorized to reinstate the license only in accordance with the terms or conditions of the order of suspension or revocation, or by an order of reinstatement by the board. This lines up the Board of Chiropractic Examiners with the other enforcement provisions that other boards in the current state statute has, and is a good safety measure. Amendment 1 alters the purpose paragraph. Amendment 2 authorizes the board to grant a stay of enforcement of a board order in accordance with the Administrative Procedural Act. There is no fiscal impact impact. There was no opposition. Move the amendments of the adoption and the adoption of the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? All in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 200 is ordered printed for third reader. Before we get to the next bill, just want to welcome, looks like we have the House pages who have joined us here for the day. We want to welcome them. Thank you for joining us today. We're glad you get to see work happening in the Senate. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 202, Senator Feldman, Prescription Drug Affordability Board, Upper Payment Limits, favorable.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, colleagues, this is an emergency bill that the committee adopted because in January of this year, certain provisions of the Prescription Drug Affordability Board expired, particularly provisions related to the upper payment limit. So this bill simply reinstates those provisions. And as before, any plan of action that the board implements must be approved by the Legislative Policy Committee or the Governor and Attorney General. If the plan is approved, the board would be authorized to set upper payment limits for prescription drug products that are purchased or paid for by any unit of state or local government, paid for through a health benefit plan on behalf of a unit of state or local government, or purchased for or paid for by Medicaid. There are no amendments to the bill. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Chair recognizes the senator from Western Maryland. What purpose does Senator rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. To ask the floor leader a couple questions, please.
Floor leader, yeah, appears so. Senator may proceed.
Sure.
Madam Chair, there was some, I take it as opposition or concern from the Department of Health.
Oh, thank you for that. I should have mentioned that in my testimony. The Department of Health did submit a letter of concern early on. They actually withdrew that letter after getting more information and just submitted a letter of information. So I believe their concerns were addressed.
Okay, by that withdrawal.
Yes.
Okay, no other questions.
Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion on the report? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 202 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 231, Senator Beidel, Maryland Medical Assistance Program, Autism Waiver, Military Families, favorable with one amendment.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Senate Bill 231 provides that a child on the registry list for autism that's in the families in the military, they move out of state, they stay on the registry and continue to move up in the event that they would come back. And in the case of Fort Meade, we have a compassionate post, and a lot of times families will transfer back in. So this would keep the child on the list and not put them back to the bottom. There is no physical impact. There was no opposition. The only amendment is a sponsor amendment, and I ask for the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment, the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any objections? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. On the amended report, any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 231 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 234, Senator Klossmeyer, Health Services Cost Review Commission, Hospital Rates, All-Payer Model Contract, favorable with one amendment.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 234 requires the Health Services Cost Review Commission, when considering various objective standards, to determine the reasonableness of hospital rates, to do so in a manner consistent with the all-payer model contract with the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The bill continues updating the code with regard to specifying that the Commission actions must be consistent with the all-payer model contract. The amendment adds sponsors. There is no fiscal impact. I move the amendment in the adoptions of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is amended, is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 234 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Nice calendar out of finance, quick and easy. We've got Education, Energy, and the Environment, calendar number 3. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 44, Senator McCray, Maryland Electricians Act revisions, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore County as the floor leader.
Thanks, Mr. President. Senate Bill 44. This emergency bill makes several changes to the Maryland Electricians Act. Specifically, the bill 1 substitute the term uninsured for inactive in provisions of law relating to liability insurance requirements for master electricians. 2, prohibits certain persons from contracting to provide electrical service unless the work is covered by specific insurance. 3, delineates who is authorized and requirements to purchase insurance. 4, requires the State Board of Electricians to specify on each license whether the license holder meets the relevant insurance requirements. And 5, update references to the entity responsible for approving the apprenticeship programs. There are no committee amendments. The fiscal impact is none. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the favorable report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 44 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 142, Senator Elfreth, University System of Maryland Board of Regents Student Member Grant, favorable.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Happy Valentine's Day, all. I think this is a bill you all are going to love. We know that there are students that serve on the Maryland Board of Regents, and there was a very generous donor who rose up to give a grant to the folks for their first year of serving on the Board of Regents. It will, this money goes in just the first year, and the university can determine that there is not in excess, funds in excess of what their tuition and fees would have covered. Hope you'll have a heart and support this bill. Move favorable. There was no opposition, no fiscal note, and this is a good bill to support our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wright. Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 142 is ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 251, Senator M. Washington, State Government Commissions on LGBTQIA+ Affairs alterations, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honored to present SB 251. Colleagues, there are a number of commissions in the state of Maryland. In 2021, we established the LGBTQ Commission. It passed this body. It was set up and it's been working for about a year. Over the course of the year, the committee in its work wishes to be more inclusive. So by adding the Q and the I and the A and the plus, it incorporates more of the community. This bill came as a request of the commission. Again, all the members are recommended by the governor. There are 2 amendments. One makes technical changes. The other one removes a redundant reference to women throughout the bill. It's not necessary. And it also adds gender identity to the bill, to the list of diversity standards that the commission membership is required to reflect. There's no fiscal impact, so I ask for your passage of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, Chair recognizes the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Questions for the floor leader, please.
Will the floor leader yield? Appear so. Senator may proceed.
Sure. Thank you very much. You mentioned that this was established in 2021?
I believe so. Yes, we passed it in 2021. It first came in 20, shut down during COVID, and then it passed this body. This legislation passed this body, establishing this commission. Right. So the commission has been operating for at least a year.
Okay. So the main premise of the bill is to add 6 additional members, right?
Oh, I forgot that part, sorry. So it's also, thank you, to increase the membership from 15 members to 21.
Right.
And then additionally, to make a more inclusive title to get the full range of people who identify as part of the LGBTQ community.
Okay, and so then is the thought that broadening the representation on this commission makes a more inclusive commission, right?
And more accurately describes the members as they self-identify. So, in other words, we can all be in a practice of being familiar with certain terminology, but then there's terminology that are used by members, particularly younger members, and so they identify with a broader group, so making sure that they're represented there in the title of the commission.
Right, and then these additional members would then make the commission more inclusive, broaden the ideas, experiences that will all contribute to making this a better commission because there are more members.
Well, there's 2 issues. So first, expanding, having a larger number of members makes it more consistent with the other commissions. So the other commissions have 21, 23, I think as many as 25, so that's the one point. The second point is changing the name at the request of the existing members who felt that the name of the commission didn't include their experience.
Okay, I appreciate that and just was really interested in thoughts on why the commission was expanded by
to be
6
consistent
members.
with other commissions.
That's very good. I appreciate that. And just you mentioned also commission was established. It's been in operations for a year.
A year, yes.
One of the requirements is that it publishes an annual report. Do we know if the first annual report has been published yet?
I can get that back. I
We could
certainly can
take a look.
find that out and get
Okay.
it to you.
All right, thanks. Mr. President, then can I lie over the bill and the amendment under the rule?
Senators move to lay the bill and the amendments over under the rule. The motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will lie over under the rule and will be heard at the appropriate time tomorrow. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 289, Senator King, Higher Education Veterans of the Afghanistan and Iraq Conflicts Scholarship, altering the name of scholarship, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Prince George's as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill renames the Veterans of the Afghanistan and Iraq Conflict Scholarship to be the Douglas J.J. Peters Veterans of the Afghanistan and Iraq Conflict Scholarship. There was no fiscal impact and no committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee's favorable report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the reports today. Chair recognizes the senator from the 7th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was asked if we could hold this bill for amendment.
Special order till tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Any objections? No objection.
No objection.
No objections. Bill will be special ordered to the appropriate time tomorrow. I suspect there may be some co-sponsor requests for this one. Yep, excellent. All right, thank you, Senator, for grabbing that and pointing it out. All right, we've got a report from Budget and Tax. This is calendar number 5. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 53, Senator Kagan, Maryland Nonprofit Development Center Program Nonprofit Interest Fee Micro Budget Loan and IMBL account funding, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from the capital cities, the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, in 2017, this body established the NIMBLE program, the Nonprofit Interest-Free Microbridge Loan Program. Unfortunately, and it was dictated $1 million would go to that program to provide low-interest loans for our nonprofit community. Unfortunately, that was not funded a number of years. Some funding was able to be scraped together. What this bill does, as amended, would require the governor include $1 million one time in the general fund to reconstitute this program and ensure that our nonprofits can access necessary bridge funding when in need. Mr. President, there are 2 committee amendments. The first makes changes to the purpose and function paragraphs, and the second changes the funding source, as I mentioned, from the Small Minority and Women-Owned Business Account, or SWMOBA, and requires the governor to allocate the $1 million from the general fund for this purpose. I move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is amended, is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title Seeing none, Senate Bill 53 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 72, Senator Jackson, income tax credit for pet-friendly rental dwelling units, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 72, as amended, creates a task force to study matters related to financial incentives for pet-friendly housing. The task force must report its recommendations on how to financially incentivize the expansion of pet-friendly housing for landlords to the Governor and the General Assembly. There were 2 committee amendments. First amendment makes the title, purpose, and function paragraphs, changes them. Second amendment strikes the provisions of the bill and establishes a task force, its membership, and duties. Move adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 72 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 94, Senator Jackson, income tax subtraction modification, volunteer fire rescue, and emergency medical services, favorable with 3 amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from St. Mary's as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 94 increases from $7,000 to $10,000 the income tax subtraction modification for volunteers of fire and rescue. There were 3 amendments. The first one adds sponsors. The second one defines public safety volunteers to include volunteer fire, rescue, and EMS personnel, and adds police auxiliaries to be eligible for the income tax subtraction modification. Amendment 3 increases the income tax subtraction for public safety volunteers, police auxiliaries, and reserve volunteers, and repeals the provision of law that currently applied to them. Move for the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections to the amendments? Without objection, the 3 amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 94 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 148, Senator GUZZONE, Victim Services Program, supplementing federal funding and support Victim Services Stabilization Act, favorable with 1 amendment.
Chair recognizes the senator from the capital city as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, the Federal Victims of Crimes Act, or VOCA, provides funding to our local governments and nonprofit organizations across the state to support victims of crimes, be they elder abuse, child abuse, rape, murder, etc. It does incredible work, and unfortunately, while it was funded by the federal government at a high of $61 million in fiscal year 2018, that funding has gone down drastically. Yet, as we all know, crime has not, and the needs to support victims only grows, particularly in this employee environment when a lot of the nonprofits are struggling to keep folks in this arena. So what the bill does is ensures that from here on out, the state will pick up whatever the federal government is not funding. Fortunate to work with Governor Hogan last year, current governor this year, to keep that maintenance of effort. So what the bill does is ensures that moving forward, the state will provide whatever the difference is, so a total of $60 million will go to these victim services programs, and that the executive director of the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services will then make sure that that is distributed accordingly across the state. Mr. President, there is 1 committee amendment that adds co-sponsors the entirety of budget and tax and the entirety of judicial proceedings, and with that, I move the adoption of the amendment in the favorable committee report.
All right. The senator moves for the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 1 committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the favorable report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 148 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 153, Senator Augustine, State Investment Portfolio Investment Thresholds Alterations, favorable.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. So with a $63 billion budget, you can imagine that money flows in and out all the time. Tax revenues in, programs out. But what we try to do is maximize our investment portfolio. So there's money that is sitting there for short periods of time. This bill is about what goes on with that short periods of time money. It requires the state treasurer to adopt regulations establishing a state investment policy and specifies thresholds for maximum investment. The bill also repeals a maximum threshold of 10% of the total investments for investments the state treasurer makes in commercial paper. There are no amendments moved for adoption of the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 153 is ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 167, Senator Elfreth, Maryland State Council, funding favorable with one amendment.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsors. The floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, the arts community was one of the hardest hit sectors during the pandemic, and it will be one of the last sectors to recover. Fortunately, the state of Maryland values the arts community so much that we actually have dedicated funding, as we all know, through the Maryland State Arts Council that then flows through our counties and then into each and every one of our communities. Senate Bill 167 is really a clarifying bill. It clarifies that the formula that we use for the state appropriation to the State Arts Council beginning in 2025, our intent originally was that both the prior year general fund appropriation and the required distribution from the the admissions and amusement tax revenues be increased by the growth of the general fund revenues. Really, this is just ensuring that the A&A tax is used as in the base funding formula instead of tacked on after the fact. And this, again, realigns the calculation with how this was funded, or calculated rather, from fiscal year 21 and earlier. Mr. President, there is one committee amendment that adds co-sponsors, and I move the adoption of the amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, chair recognizes the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the floor leader, yield, please.
Senator may proceed.
Just trying to understand that funding formula again. Could you go over that, please?
Sure. So we originally, when we passed the bill, I was not here, but I believe it was the intent of this body to ensure that the A&A tax, the $1 million, would go into the base funding formula, and then the multiplier would be used from that base funding formula. Unfortunately, prior to post-fiscal year 21, Department of Budget and Management decided to tack on the A&A tax, the $1 million, after the formula instead of before. So this would just realign it again to before the multiplier.
So the fiscal note shows that it goes from 1 million to 2 million to 3.1 to 4.2 million until FY28. What do we know that it does after 28? Is it continuing at an additional $1 million every year?
It would continue. Again, it's realigning the $1 million in that base before the multiplier, so that's why it's going up more than $1 million every year, because we're adjusting the base funding formula. So depending on the growth of the general fund, which is the multiplier you see on page 3 of the fiscal note, if the general fund growth keeps going up, then theoretically this would go up as well. General fund growth goes down, it would possibly go down.
Okay, but the governor's budget would have to follow that formula.
Yes.
And that goes on into perpetuity, as far as it just increases every year with no necessarily end date in sight, that it's reached a certain amount of money and everybody feels that that's fine. We need another $1 million or plus every single year.
In perpetuity, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. President, can I move that the bill and the amendment lie over under the rule, please?
Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will lie over under the rule. We'll take it up at the appropriate time tomorrow. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 217, Senator McCray, Transit Commuter Bus Services Procurement, favorable with one amendment.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsors. The floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 217 requires MTA, Maryland Transit Administration, to use the competitive sealed proposals of procurement when selecting a commuter bus service. Provider MTA must also conduct a procurement for a commuter bus service provides in accordance with the provisions and regulations adopted under state procurement law. The amendments add sponsors to the bill. Mr. President, please move adoption of the amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 217 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 241, Senator GUZZONE, Commercial Law, Abandoned Property Alterations, favorable.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think probably everyone is familiar with the abandoned property program that the comptroller runs. You see it in the newspapers. You might find some money lying around from an old relative that you may be coming about. What happens, though, is that usually the property comes out of a safety deposit box. And people put things in safety deposit boxes that don't have any value. And the comptroller is required to put everything that they find or that is abandoned up for auction within a year of which they acquire it. And what we're talking about here are the thing they talk about all the time is locks of hair, little mementos, maybe a souvenir, something along those lines that have absolutely no monetary value. They can't auction it off because nobody wants it. But they have no mechanism of getting rid of that, so they store it. And they've got a tractor trailer load worth of this stuff. And quite frankly, they'd like to get rid of it and not have to pay the expenses of doing that. So all this does is authorize the comptroller in this very specific area to dispose of this property that has no value. Move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leaders move the adoption of the favorable committee report. Does this mean the comptroller has a tractor trailer full of locks of hair? Is that fair? State government, you gotta love it. So the real work gets done. All right, on the report, any discussion? All in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 241 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 242, Senator GUZZONE, Income Tax Work Opportunity Tax Credit Technical Correction, favorable.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
So actually, I should have mentioned the last one, and the next two are all from the comptroller's office. This next one is purely technical, that corrects an incorrect cross-reference to the Federal Internal Revenue Code relating to the Federal Work Opportunity Tax Credit. Move adoption of the committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? All in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 242 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 243, Senator GUZZONE, Income Tax Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit Alterations, favorable, one amendment.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Okay, this is also kind of a technical correction, but it actually closes a loophole. It limits the eligibility for state child and dependent tax care credit to resident taxpayers. So it turns out some smart people in some other states figured out how they were going to get the tax credit from Maryland. And interestingly enough, this is actually going to save us some money, about $300,000 a year. So I move adoption of the amendment and the favorable committee report. The amendment adds sponsors.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 243 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. All right, senators, the desk is clear. Good work today. This was a lot of movement. We're getting into the habit. It's looking good. Let's do committee announcements. Chair recognizes the Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet today at 1 p.m. to continue our bill hearings.
All right, 1 p.m. Chair recognizes the Chair of Education, Energy, and the Environment.
The EEE Committee will meet at 1 p.m. for 8 bill hearings, Mr. President.
1 p.m. Chair recognizes the Chair of Budget and Tax.
Thank you, Mr. President. At 1 o'clock, we'll be meeting for budget hearings for full committee.
Full committee, 1 o'clock. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair of Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Judicial Proceedings Committee will meet in the committee room for bill hearings at 1 p.m.
1 p.m. Wonderful. All right. Additional select committees, delegations. Yes, Chair recognizes the Chair of the Veterans Caucus. No?
Yes, sir, but not as that today. Prince George's Senate Delegation Caucus meeting immediately after the floor session tomorrow.
After the floor session tomorrow. Excellent. Chair recognizes the Chair of the Montgomery County Delegation.
Thanks, Mr. President. Montgomery County colleagues, this is a reminder that tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., in the Media Center in the Miller Building, Leadership Montgomery is bringing their newest class to come visit with us. If you recall, last year they had at least 60, 70 people who came. They were very appreciative of having the opportunity to meet with the Montgomery County delegation. So please, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And hopefully we'll have a full delegation for you this week. We hope. All right. Yes, Chair recognizes the Senator from Carroll County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to see if I can make one more introduction. We had more folks come in from Leadership Carroll, but specifically, so I want to welcome them, but specifically also want to welcome Katie Berry, who's our head of our elections, Carroll County Board of Elections, is in the gallery with her high school intern, Sarah Zentner from Liberty High School, who was part of a championship volleyball team this year, but they're all here. So if you could welcome the rest of the class and also Katie Berry from our Board of Elections.
Welcome. Thank you. Thanks for being here. All right. Yes, co-chair of the Protocol Committee.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. To follow up what the Senator from Frederick County had mentioned earlier, members of the Maryland Boys and Girls Clubs will be visiting Annapolis and your offices today. Since it is Valentine's Day, please show the Boys and Girls Club some love. Thank you.
Well done. All right, thank you. Chair recognizes the Senator from Baltimore County, followed by Anne Arundel County.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This may sound like an odd request, but I noticed all of the wonderful clothespins on the bags. If you're going to throw your clothespin away, please give it to me so I can make good use of it.
All right.
Thank you.
Excellent. Reuse, recycle, you know. Chair recognizes the Senator from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a quick announcement about former Delegate Jimmy Malone, if I can share that.
Senator may proceed, please.
I wanted to share with you the Senate update. And our former delegate, Jimmy Malone, is home from the hospital. He was diagnosed with a very treatable form of leukemia, and he'd love to have your cards and hear from you. And I think Protocol is going to send out his mailing address, or you can contact me if you'd like his mailing address. Thank you.
Please do. That's great. Thank you for letting us know, Senator. Treatable. Good. Scary.
Mr. President,
yes, Chair,
may I say
Senator from
something?
Baltimore County.
It may have been said already. I talked about the clothespins, but I want to thank you very much for the protocol, for the Valentine's surprise.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It was very kind, very kind. Well done. Lots of work went into it. It's very clear. Thank you. Senator from District 40, do we have anything? Baltimore City? No? Okay. All right. I think that does it for the day. Anything for the good of the order? If not, let's do a quorum call before we adjourn.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone, or their presence, rather? So the clerk will almost take the call. With 46 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Wednesday, February 15th at 10 a.m.
Without objection, so ordered. Have a phenomenal day. Happy Valentine's Day.